Transferable skills.
From Cackle Media, this is Transferable Skills. I'm Noah Mishkin. Today's guest is Moshe Isenberg, who shares his career journey from nonprofit into founding and running a massive multi-million-dollar insurance company, and then back again into nonprofit work. Moshe, it's great to have you here today.
Noah, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I really am a big fan of the podcast that you run over here. And really, I've learned a lot from all your guests. So I'm excited to be included as one of those guests. And hopefully some folks can pick some tidbits up from me.
I'm really looking forward to the knowledge that you're going to share with our guests, because I know you have a lot of experience that's diverse, quite a variety of different skills for yourself.
Likewise, you've been on an awesome journey yourself professionally. So I think this should be reversed. I'd like to ask you a bunch of questions. So
Thank you. That's enough about me.
You. Yeah.
Awesome. So I've known you in a bunch of different phases of my life. And the one that stands out to me most is, if there's a couple things that people might say about you, character, who you are, is first of all, one of the most selfless, generous people that I know. You're always looking to do for others, to always help others. Something that really stands out to me as a hallmark of your character, being able to relate to people, connect with people. And that's why I think you're in some ways so good at what you do in nonprofit work. And it just only makes sense, not to jump too far ahead. It makes complete sense why you got into insurance, but we can talk about those things as they organically unfold throughout this conversation.
No, it's very nice of you to say. I appreciate it. I think I got from my parents the ability to be empathetic to people and to look at people in a way that, and treat people in a way that you want to be treated. Both my parents were educators and community minded people who also just were selfless and did for the community. And you do them both. And I think that they are people, my mother who passed away a while back, and my father who's still doing for the community. And I think that when you grow up with those people around you, you get to get that ingrained in you. And so it's something that you see this opportunity of someone that is in need of something, and you try to help them out. If you could personally benefit from it, great. If you can't personally benefit from it, that's okay, because it's a benefit for the world. And I think that one of the nice things about what I've evolved on that was, it doesn't really matter your religion, it doesn't really matter your race, doesn't really matter anything, ethnicity. The bottom line is we're all part of the world, and we all want the same thing out of it. There's always a common denominator that you could find. And at the end of the day, finding that common denominator is easy, much easier than people think. And if you tap into it, the rest of it's gravy.
There are few things in life that give an individual an opportunity for having the most sense of fulfillment, satisfaction, and happiness than helping others. And if it's been a few hours or days since anyone out here has helped somebody, give it a shot. Help an old lady across the street, carry groceries to someone's car for them, help give them some advice, anything that you can do to help another. I guarantee you'll sleep well at night. And to be able to devote one's professional life to the service of others is, I think it's a gift of an opportunity.
There are several organizations, charity organizations that I do not work for, that are looking for people to volunteer, whether it's a food pantry, whether it's a secondhand shop that they're giving away and clothing and things like that. And these are places that you can find in any community, and basically for sure in the United States. And you can always volunteer there. And I think it does give a sense of belonging for you, and it gives a sense of accomplishment. I think one of the greatest accomplishments for me was my daughter 2 days ago said to me, "Daddy, can you call up your friend who runs the Chesed organization in Chicago?" And I said, "Why?" He said, "Because I arranged that 3 of my friends want to volunteer there, and I want to find a time that we can do that." And she did that on her own. And again, that comes from seeing my wife and myself just looking to volunteer for different things. So that's what's already being passed on. And that's not to give myself an attaboy. That's just, again, something that you pick up, and that's what it's about.
Leading by example doesn't end at home.
No.
It doesn't end at work. It's everywhere in life. Being a role model for your children. For those listening, chesed is the Hebrew word for charity, kindness, helping others. And I think it's a valuable lesson to impart on your children, whether it is charitable contributions financially to organizations, how you a specific tithe that you do systematically, or it is as needed, but to demonstrate to your children the sense of giving back, not because the government asked you to from your tax perspective, but even after that, knowing that you've worked hard for your income and you're taking care of your family first, and then to make sure that you're also taking care of community at large. and that you're giving back to the community, both with time, with money, resources, anything that you can do. It really strikes a chord. It hits my heart.
Yeah, 100%. Your family's the same way, I know, and I'm not unique in any way. It's a lot of folks are like that. It's just a matter of doing it. And I think it also helps you be more in attune in business, which is very important, because once you are sensitive to everybody around you and those that need help, it lets you be sensitive more to how you deal with people in the business world.
It's remarkable to me when I see organizations, if there's companies out there that offer a percentage of time, either a week to donate your time to others, or if it's making sure that they are participating in a contribution match, that they are sponsoring charitable events. Anytime I see a company that is participating charitably, especially if they're giving the opportunity for their staff, their employees to do it on the company's time, that to me sends the right message, sends the right signal, says that we're here for things that are bigger and greater than just our brand. And I know you can make the argument that it's a sense of marketing too, but one of the things I heard, this is so many years ago, Tim Ferriss show, he's got this lightning round at the end of every episode. One of the things that he would always ask all of his guests is, if you were given a billboard where you can put a message out to the world, what would that be? One of his guests once said, assume best intent.
Right.
I thought that was such a great message, despite what you might perceive or read into or can make excuses about. And in this case, talking about corporations doing charitable sponsorships, and yeah, it's brand awareness and so on and so forth. But assume best intention, that they have an opportunity to give back in some way to the community, to empower their staff and their employees to be able to follow their heart, their passion, and do it at the cost of the company's time and money. Forget about excuses, reasons. They're doing it. It's about the results, the bottom line there.
That's right. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Nonprofit that I work for now, one of their arms is a relief mission where they're taking adults and teens to different parts of the world, Puerto Rico and New Orleans, and rebuilding for hurricanes and things like that. And companies show up. And I said, where did you find these companies? They found us online, and they want to send people because it's part of their mission to help. And we're a conduit to get them to figure it out. So it's great.
You just mentioned the organization that you work for. Let's take a step back. Somebody with a diverse set of interests and skills like yourself, you're coming up in this world. You're trying to figure out what you want to do as you, so to speak, grow up. You started first at a nonprofit organization. How did you make that decision? Why was that the direction that you took?
So it's actually a funny story that I've told multiple times. I actually fell into this because my mom, and because of, at the time, my girlfriend. I was going out with who would then become my wife, and I really wanted to get engaged. And my mom told me that if I wanted to get engaged, I needed a job. So I was going for at Loyola University in Chicago. I was getting my MBA. She said, okay, that's very nice, but if you want, you got to be able to support yourself. You got to get a job. So I called up all my friends and I said, guys, I want to get engaged. I need a job. And you could do this, you could do this, you could do that. And I went on a bunch of interviews, and I'm like, oh, I don't know. And then one guy said, you know what? You were a camp counselor. And I said, yeah. They said, why don't you work for NCSY? And I said, for what? And they said, NCSY, it's like camp. They're like a youth organization, and they run good programs, and they're a Jewish outreach group, and they help teens to get more connected to their Judaism, and you'd be good at it. And I said, I don't know much about it. And they said, well, that's okay. You'll be all right. Which, by the way, if fast forward, seems to be the general theme of the way my career goes. You don't know much about it, but don't worry, you'll be okay. And we'll talk about that later, but it really does seem to be that theme. Don't worry, you'll be okay.
Is that other people telling you, don't worry, you'll figure it out, or you have to convince yourself that?
No, that's everyone else. Their confidence in me is way more than my confidence in myself. Don't worry, you'll be okay. And I said, okay. And then I called the office at NCSY over and over and over and over again until I finally got an interview. And then I don't even know how much they said they'd pay me at the time. And I'm like, okay, great. My first pay stub, which I have still, was dated August 7th of 2000. And I got engaged August 21st of 2000. That was going to be approximately in my head, maybe a 2-year job. And I was running a chapter working with teenagers, and it was great. It was a lot of fun. They had weekends, retreats, and it was great. And somehow 16 years later, I was still doing it.
Relationships are expensive. You need a job.
Yeah, yeah, I needed a job, and it just again, it was the way it worked out was just I just kept growing into the role, and I really kept finding myself utilizing more and more skills, and realizing that this was something that I could do. If you were learning management skills in Loyola, educationally wise, and or marketing skills, so they would ask you to write papers on management, and a lot of these papers were real world experience on management, and I was writing papers on management, like managing teams and managing offices and things like that. And they were blown away by what's going on in this nonprofit. They thought I was making it up. And I thought, no, this is really what I'm doing. The nonprofit that I was working for is part of a much bigger organization. It's a national organization. And so it was really interesting to get into the like nooks and crannies, if you will, of things. And it moved up the ranks of being in charge of this one chapter to being in charge of this one division to being in charge of an entire sector of the region, to being in charge of the entire marketing of the organization, at least of the region of the organization, to being the second in command of the entire organization, which basically meant managing the whole staff. Finally, they asked me to be executive director of the organization, which was pretty much meant that I was in charge of all the financial decisions, the fundraising.
Were you looking for that kind of career growth?
No. On the back of my head, I always wanted to be a stockbroker. It just was something I thought would be really cool. I always wanted to go into advertising, something I thought would be really cool. I just parenthetically, I'll just tell you that when I was in Loyola, my professor, Bob Mullenbach, told me that if I wanted to go into advertising, I should go to this advertising conference at downtown Chicago. Now, remember, downtown Chicago, we have William Blair. We have all the big guys are in downtown Chicago.
Sure.
And this was in 2001. Things were rock and rolling. I went down there and it was unbelievable. It was fantastic. I came back after 2 days and then I said, Bob, I got to thank you. And Bob says, so what did you discover? I said, discovered I don't want to go into advertising.
Wow.
And it was an unbelievable moment of clarity for me that what I was chasing after wasn't something that I really wanted. And when you have that opportunity, I would not have gotten that clarity if not for Bob Mullenbach sending me there. And when you talk about, was it something that I always wanted, right? So you don't have that clarity until you actually are put in that position. I can't tell you what the reason was that someone put me in a position, my boss put me in a position to grow. Probably the most fun of a position that I've ever had in the organization was probably when I was doing the marketing. I only had to come up with campaigns, and that was my thing. I think I'm a creative person. I like doing it. I wasn't responsible for any money, just had to spend it on marketing. And I love that stuff. Once you realize that like you're doing it and you get put in that situation, much like being sent to that advertising conference, you realize what you like and what you don't like. First, I was running the junior division of the NCSY group, and I was running the weekends on my own. And then I was forward to the marketing and fast forward to being associate director, which is when you're managing the staff. And I realized, yeah, I could do this. I can manage the staff. I could set goals and KPIs and all these things that like I had no idea what they meant before. But you learn them and they're not that hard. Then came the kind of the ultimate of you're going to be executive director. What does that mean? Have you ever heard of QuickBooks? I've heard of it.
I got good news and bad news for you.
Yeah. Do you know what a budget is? Yeah, how about fundraising? And I'm like, I'm not fundraising. You got any brains? And then again came number 2. Don't worry, you're going to be good at it.
You'll figure it out.
And I said, you'll figure it out. You're going to be good at it. And I said, you're crazy.
I'd like to pick your brain apart and understand what it was that you assumed the perceptions about the advertising world that were debunked, or at least the clarity that you got at that conference. What was it that in 2 days gave you enough information to realize it's not what you wanted to be, despite what you thought it would be?
Okay, so I think it's twofold. One is a personal thing. You have to know yourself, and you have to know what you're comfortable with as a person. There's a lot of stuff that if you want to get into certain circles, certain worlds, and certain things like that, you have to be okay with doing certain things. I'm not a party goer. I'm not a big drinker. I'm not that kind of person.
It was a culture clash.
Can you be successful if you're not in that culture? There are probably people who are successful and not in that culture. For someone that was 23 at the time and not really confident that they could be, and really more confident that they needed to fit in order to be successful, that was the first thing that kind of threw me off. The second thing was I really saw that, and I don't know if I'd call this culture, but the business is really cutthroat.
To do well in your position, the assumption is that others have to suffer or you have to just outpace them in order to be successful in that role.
Yeah, you basically have to, when you're pitching a deck, you're not pitching a deck. And if I can jump to fundraising for 1 second, when I'm pitching a fundraising deck to a philanthropist, if I'm asking you for a six-figure gift and the other organization is asking you for a six-figure gift, the chances are you could afford to give both organizations a six-figure gift. Those are the chances. I don't feel like I'm competing against them. But when I'm going to Coca-Cola with an advertising campaign, okay, you're only going to pick one advertising campaign. So the end of the day is these guys have to be horrible. And I have to tell you why their ad, not only why my ad is great, but why their ad isn't going to sell enough. At the end of the day, it's just not something that I wanted to go into. And that's the same thing with being a stockbroker, is that when you got in there and you saw the floor, which I did, and you follow a stockbroker, which I did, you realize that, oh my goodness, like this is insanity. What do you value more? Do you value more? And again, we could talk about this later, but what do you value in your life more? Do you value money as the highest, thing that matters? Or do you value quality of life, the highest thing that matters? Does money equal quality of life? Does quality of life trump money? Well, where do you sit on that scale? And so
Yeah.
if you're able to balance that, now in my head, again, remember, and in my head, my parents were not business people. My grandparents, both sides, were not business people. To me, it all came down to my culture growing up was not necessarily a business culture. So
These were the values that you were raised under.
yeah, so it was like, there's nothing really wrong with it. And advertising looks fun. It looks cool. But I bet, and here really what the kicker was, I bet I could take what I love, what I think I love about advertising, and take it wherever I go.
So this is actually a perfect segue because part of what I wanted to understand was that epiphany, that realization and understanding of that moment where you changed the direction of your future because of something that you now had access to, more information and exposure to now be better informed. And what you just said about the ability to take what you loved about that one job, industry, skill set that's required to do that well, and then apply it elsewhere, which is truly the heart and soul of this podcast. Now we get into nonprofit work. Can you help me understand the biggest joys you got early on was when you were running all the marketing?
Yeah.
And in a sense, you're living out some of your dreams in some of the ways that you advertised, campaigns, promoted for events for your constituents, the community. What was that like? And how did you
Bingo.
figure that out?
Yeah, bingo. That was me working in advertising. That was it. That was me working in advertising. You get the nail on the head. That was me working in advertising in a way that I had full control, and I was dealing with the competition of a kind competition, right?
Yeah.
Because there are lots of organizations that maybe work with teens or that are fighting, so to speak, for a donation dollar. But
Sure.
at the end of the day, the people that we're fighting for, the teens could go to they could technically go to multiple programs. Philanthropists can give to multiple organizations, and they do, and teens do go to multiple organizations as well. And this was the idea of getting the creativity of this advertising. What would you do? But then who really cares about Coke at the end of the day? The only person that really cares about Coke is Coke. Okay. But if I can take a concept and translate it to do better for the world or the mission of what the nonprofit organization is, which in our case is inspiring kids to become closer or more connected to Israel or their Judaism or their heritage, right? And be proud of it, then that's better for the world. And so that's something that is better for the greater good. So you're taking the advertising and you're doing a SWOT analysis. And that's the cool thing about it. I was bringing all these MBA terms, all these marketing terms, and I was bringing them to a nonprofit level. And I actually do it now. I sit on the board of my kid's school. I had this conversation Friday, which was 3 days ago. And I'm saying to myself, if you want to do a rebrand, have we polled the parents? Have we asked them are things good?
Have you done the market research?
Yeah, are we sure like the timing is fortuitous to do this? And we're asking questions. It's this kind of stuff that like you came up with these campaigns and these catchy slogans, which were working in ways that we were advertising that were never done by any organization ever.
And what you're promoting and marketing, it's actually no different than the goals of Coca-Cola. It's a lifestyle brand. What you're trying to do is you're trying to put in the hands of your constituents, the people that seem to have some sort of connection with your brand, your product. But the difference there afterwards is, okay, what's the long-term value? And so for Coca-Cola, the long-term value is repeat customer and to selling them more products over a lifetime. The value of a nonprofit organization such as the one you work at is that you're trying to influence positive lifestyle choices, positive values, morals, and it truly is a lifestyle brand. It's about influencing them into making good choices for themselves forever on.
Going back to the Hesed organization, right? Their goal is simple.
Yeah.
They just want to provide goods. And there's lots of organizations like that, which is wonderful. But at the end of the day, that's their goal. They need to raise money for that.
You're talking about other nonprofits. So maybe this is a good time for me to get your opinion on my hot take.
Oh,
Yeah, I know. My hot take is there are too many nonprofit organizations. And allow me to clarify before you jump down my throat. I have not come across a single nonprofit organization that I don't believe intends to and is likely providing a good service that is needed. I often find that there are too many nonprofits in a given area that overlap in services, all trying to draw funds and support from the same pool. The more hyper local you can get, the more accurate that statement is. What is your thought here?
Okay, so I'd like to qualify your question, if I may.
Please.
You said a lot in there.
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying that there isn't one organization, and maybe I misheard you. I'm assuming I misheard you. Are you saying there isn't one organization that does a good thing on its own?
No, that'd be a ridiculous hot take. No, what I'm saying is every organization is doing good work.
Right.
I'm not talking about outliers that we don't talk about.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Every organization is doing good work and they have good intentions and a good mission and they're supporting needs that exist. What I'm saying is there's often, if you want to take
whatever, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
A and B.
There are too many organizations that are based in Evanston, Illinois that are trying to save the whales of Lake Michigan. And so when you're trying to draw from a pool of funds and resources in a very hyper local specific area for the same overlapping mission, the results are going to be harder to achieve when there's too much saturation.
Okay. As a donor, I may agree with you. As a client, I would absolutely not agree with you. As a organization employee, I for sure would not agree with you.
Of course, job security is important.
Now, it's up to the organization employee to make those determinations to figure out what makes them different. If someone comes to you and says, I'm raising money for this, and you ask them, we get this question all the time. What makes you different than another organization, right?
Sure.
We have to come up with that answer, which we know. To your point, I think that there are definitely overlaps in certain things.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and I've spoken to the organization leaders, both of them, 3 of them, 5 of them, 6 of them. They all basically say that when it comes to the clients, there aren't enough organizations that do the same thing. In other words, you're pulling from a pool of money where because of the leadership of the different organizations, those leaders attract a different pool of donors.
Yeah, I hear.
And those donors will, because those donors are giving to those leaders, thereby the clients benefit. Okay?
Right.
That's the first reason why they need to exist. But from a bottom line philanthropist outlook, I would say you're right. If you're looking at what I'm saying, you provide and you do this and you do this so it is a fair question for any donor to ask. But I have heard stories from individual donors who I've gone to for nonprofits who have said to me that they're giving money to individuals who have already gone to all 4 of 5 of these organizations that I think do the same thing for different money.
Yeah.
So it has to do with what attracts what donors, I think.
No, that's a very fair response. I'll have to think about that longer. You said something that's really resonates with me already, which is that if there's essentially, I'm going to paraphrase, if there's still a need out there, then there's clearly not enough organizations or support out there. So as long as there's still a need that's not being filled, then clearly we're not doing enough. I always look at it from, maybe it's the wrong way to look at it. I often look at it from the standpoint of economy of scale,
Right.
but I could very well be wrong.
But I think you're right, but unfortunately, politics
Correct.
plays a role. For us, I think it's even simpler. I think that, like I said before, I think it depends on who the leadership of the organization is, and I think that we have different people who run different organizations and different sects of the city, and different people follow different ideas, and so that's it. There are people who don't care, and there are people who care, and so the people that care, they want to fund an organization, they're going to do it.
Walk me through that realization that nonprofit is where your heart was and what you want to do. So you're doing the advertising, you're being fulfilled in that discipline, marketing, advertising for the nonprofit. You moved into fundraising. Am I right? You were doing fundraising
Yeah.
for the nonprofit. Where does that spark come from? How did you
Right.
move from nonprofit into the insurance world?
I don't want to jump through moved into fundraising. It's skipping over the fun part, but moved into or thrown into, either one is good. That's, again, like I mentioned before, it's one of those, don't worry, you'll be good at it. It's not something I wanted to do at all. I really didn't want to do it. I think fundraising is given a bad rap in general
Why?
because you're given this impression of being a beggar because you need to go around with a cup and saying, here it is. And the truth is, I didn't think I'd be any good at it. I think my greatest fundraising meeting was my first fundraising meeting. And there was a guy who was giving us, I think, $500. And I was asking him if he'd meet us and blah, blah, blah. Went back and forth and back and forth. Finally, I met with him. He asked me some questions. I didn't know the answers. I said, I don't know the answers. He said, who will know the answers? I said, this person will know. He said, great, let's call him right now. We called him right now, right there at the phone. He gave him the answers, and I came up with $2,500, which is 5 times more than what he ever gave. And I said, that was my greatest fundraiser. It was my first one.
Do you think that it was the greatest one because it was your first one because you didn't have the experience and therefore you just approached it naturally as you would, or maybe even, dare I say, should? And would you do anything differently today than you did then?
No, I think it was my greatest one because I never did it before, and
You got to win.
it was a win, and I did my own style, and it was right then and there that I learned that, as silly as this is going to sound, I learned that I can ask a lot of people a lot of questions on how they would handle a situation, but nobody's going to do it like I do it, for better or worse. I have a certain way of dealing with people and talking to people. Again, for better or worse, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but that's just how it is. And fast forward a couple more months and a couple more months and a couple more months. And yes, I never liked the budgeting part of it ever, but I started to really enjoy the fundraising part of it. And I started really to get to know these donors and really get to know the community. The issue that I was having that I had to get out of my head was that living in the community that you are fundraising from becomes a little bit of an obstacle, because when you live in the community, then you're fundraising from the community. How do you get that out of your head that you are going to see on the street Noah, and you just ask Noah for money, right?
Right.
But the reality is, it's in your head. Noah couldn't care less, and Noah does not look at you any differently. Noah knows that you're doing it. Noah knows that when he writes you a check, he's not writing you a check. He's writing the organization a check. And so I found out that it was real quickly that it was just in my head. And once you got over that, so that became something that you could accomplish. And I was doing it, and we were raising good money, and thank God we were raising more money than we had before, and things were great. One of the donors that I really got to know was a businessman who owned a lot of different properties and different businesses, and said to me in one of our meetings, "You'd be really good in business." And if I were to pause here, I would just like to say this is something that I've heard multiple times from people when I was having fundraising conversations. I don't know. I don't know why they say that. I really don't know. I'm not sure what the basis for that is, except that I would say that maybe sales doesn't come naturally to people and it comes naturally to me. Maybe schmoozing doesn't come naturally to people and it comes more naturally to me. Again, you have to really know somebody well to say you're going to be good at this. I feel like my friends knew me well enough to know that I was going to be good at the nonprofit. I feel like my boss knew me well to say that I was going to be good at fundraising. The folks, and I'm not saying one or the other, but the folks that say, you really should do business. I think what they were trying to do really was just saying like, why would you want to stay in nonprofit? Well, you could really do well and make more money doing business.
I mean,
Uh,
listen, there's a part of them that might be saying that. And there are probably also a number of people that do know you well enough, such as myself. And I would say the same exact thing to you that you'd be really good in business. And the things
right.
that I can see, the natural fit is obviously sales because you fit a philosophy, your approach to fundraising and therefore sales is very similar to mine. I don't want to oversell anyone on anything. I don't ever want to make promises I can't keep. I don't ever want to make one sale. I want to create a relationship that yields a lifetime value, a lifetime relationship of recurring sales, recurring spending and commitment to whatever it is that I'm asking them to be part of. And so for you, you're approaching it with mutual benefits. I'm going to tell you this is something that you should be purchasing, buying, or donating to, not because I want your money, but because I believe I know you well enough that this is something that you would appreciate. So it's an organic,
Right.
natural, quote unquote, sale or fundraise, is that you're approaching people because you know them and because you think that this is going to be a good fit for them. So that's the first thing, sales. Okay. I get there's two others. Yes, you're a
Yeah.
good talker. Talk about MBA. You did get your MBA. You do have this strategic vision. And I think that's very important. I think you have a very pleasant disposition that is relatable. I think how to reach people. That's why you're good at fundraising, why you're good at sales. But you also know how to manage people and you know how to look strategically for long term value and vision. And I think that's very relatable in business. So obviously, the people who are telling you to go into it because they think you can do better, okay, whatever, that's a suggestion. But I think the people who are saying you'd be very good at it because they know you, it's because they know you well enough to know what your skills and strengths are.
So I appreciate that, but I think there's one really important thing that I think people sometimes miss. The reason that you can be good at something, whether it's sales or schmoozing or whatever, is because you really know and are passionate of and love.
That was my number three, is that you're passionate, is because in order to do anything, you have to believe in it yourself and be passionate about it.
It's very hard to be passionate about a widget. It's very hard to be passionate about a widget. It's very hard to convince somebody you're selling peanuts at Ridley Field or you're selling cars or selling it's hard. It's hard. Insurance is a commodity and it's hard. So I'll tell you that fast forward, guy said, why don't we start an insurance agency together? And I said, well, it sounds very exciting. And I become partners. You'll be the owner, this and that. You'll be a CEO. And I said, I don't know anything about insurance. He said, so you'll learn. I said, okay. And it was one of those things where it's a big risk. And where are you going to get such an opportunity? This guy is a good friend of mine, still is a good friend of mine, very generous guy, and was very kind enough to offer me such an opportunity, which not everybody gets in the world. And I jumped at it. And so I went through the insurance licensing and the testing and went to the classes and this and that. And I started to get my feet wet and started learning it real quick. What used to be for me a call to State Farm became really, really quickly, oh, what's covered, what's not covered. And I learned it, and I learned it, and we insured a lot of stuff real quickly, whether it was healthcare related stuff or automobiles and houses and property and workers comp and business insurance and cyber insurance and all these things, the theft insurance. And then I had friends, that I knew and from different walks of life who I said, hey, I'm in the insurance business. They said, great, take my business. And I started getting more business. And it was a very interesting time for me because again, I was doing interesting stuff and really learning it and doing well. And so I was really getting into the nitty gritty again and learning this whole new thing, which was exciting, really doing an entire shift. But at the same time, maintaining the skill set of, okay, I'm going to treat people the way I've always treated people. I'm going to deal with people the way I've always dealt with people. And so whether or not you had a policy that generated $100 in commission for our agency, or it generated $35,000 or $100,000 of commissions for our agency, you got treated the same way. And people knew that.
Yeah, that resonates with me personally because you should always treat everything equally because you never know where that will lead to also. You want, first of all, to provide a good service that you can stand upon and feel proud of. You want them to feel good about the relationship and about what they're buying into. And if they do, and it is working out, they're going to make referrals to you. When people turn away small business, I'm not going to say universally that is a bad idea. It has to fit your business model and your plan. And it has to also not come at the cost of whatever your capacity is. But people who turn it away simply because they think it's not, quote, worth my time, it's myopic, it's short-sighted, and they're not really in it for the right reasons. They don't see the value, don't see the long-term opportunity.
Probably my personal best accomplishment, but the biggest compliment for sure that I got was when I was insuring with the same State Farm agency for years and years. And when I opened up my own agency, I pulled it all and insured it myself, right? And told the agent, listen, I'm doing it myself. And she totally understood. She called me a few months later and said, listen, I have a client who I can't insure. Maybe you can insure them. You're talking about an agent who dealt directly with her agency and couldn't do it. And so she's calling me, the new guy, just because you dealt with her fairly. And I was a good client of hers. She was a good agent for me. And it's just something that paid back. And by the way, when I went back to the nonprofit world, I went back to her with all my stuff. So it's something that you just don't forget, and that's the way it works.
The integrity and respect of a solid relationship.
Yeah. So I was going all over. Traveling all over. I was going to Texas and Indiana and all over. And a lot of things were done by phone, but also obviously, a lot of these things were also coming up with partnerships. And I was finding that I didn't need necessarily to have an entire back end on my own. I could leverage other agencies to help with the back end. And that's how things were being done. And the truth is that there were a lot of agencies today that still do that they use a lot of other agencies to run their back end. And people don't really know about it, but it doesn't really matter just how the world works because there's just so many people and there's wholesale brokers and the retail brokers. And I was learning about captive insurance and self-insurance and how things work. And it was it's a fascinating thing. It really is a fascinating thing. But there is a sense of nerves that Saturday night you'll get a phone call saying, our building had a flood. Okay, you're going to have to call claims. What do you mean I'm going to have to call claims? You're my agent.
I don't want to do it. You do it.
Exactly. Okay. This is just the way it goes. It's a very fascinating business, and it's a lucrative business, and it's a business that I was very happy and proud to be a part of.
Until you weren't happy.
I was always happy to be a part of it. I really was. It was a great organization, a great business. And then about 5 years into it, had an opportunity to be bought out of it and took it. I felt like it was the time for me to do other things. And I think that I took it where I thought that I could take it. We grew it the way we can grow it. And that was it.
How many years were you running the insurance agency?
Okay, so it was about 5 years I was running the insurance agency. And then when I was out of the insurance agency, maybe you've had this opportunity, maybe you haven't. For some people, it's scary. And for some people, if you can afford to do this, it's very enlightening. If you have an opportunity to think about what your next move is, a lot of people can't do that. But if you can do that, it's very cathartic.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's figure this out. And sometimes the opportunities present themselves, and sometimes they don't. And I was thinking about what is it that I liked? And all these things came back to me about, I did the advertising part of it. I did the marketing stuff. I did like the sales. No, I do like sales. But you know what?
Yeah.
I really did fundraising. At the end of the day, I really did like fundraising.
Did you like it because you just figured out that you enjoyed that? Or was it more that you were good at it and therefore you found fulfillment in something you were good at?
I think it is exciting to me to be able to offer people an opportunity to invest in something with guaranteed returns. I'm not selling magic beans.
Right.
Okay. I'm selling opportunity to invest in something that has proven results. Now, you're not going to get a return on your investment in finances.
Yeah.
You want to invest in sending teens on a summer program or to Israel or to things like that. You're going to do it. And we're going to send you a video from it. You're going to see it right away. It's immediate returns. And not only are you going to see immediate returns, you're also going to have long-term returns. So I started talking to some different headhunter. A headhunter called me up. I really wasn't actively looking, and I interviewed for this and that. And all of a sudden, my old boss from the organization I was with, who now is the national director, called me up and said, I hear you're done with the insurance. And I said, yeah. I have an idea. I want you to go around and fundraise for the programs that we do, not the programs locally, for all the programs that we do. Whatever program works, whatever program you think will fit any donor, not donors that we have, donors that we don't have, donors that we don't even know about. Go find them. And I started with basically zero donors that I was going after.
How do you build your book of business, so to speak?
Yeah, this was something that was not easy to do, but it was something that it was like, it started one by one. What are the sales skills, right? No one gave me the Glengarry leads.
Right. Those are the good leads.
There were no Glengarry leads. But what there was is like there are books and there are articles and there are websites and there are things like that. And the stuff is out there if you just look for it.
Did you feel that you needed to look for the strategies, or could you just rely on your own internal instincts and background?
You need to be able to find to get the information from somewhere. You need the names from somewhere. LinkedIn was a big help, and other federations was a big help. And there were things, not necessarily employees of these places, but just names that they had listed and things like that. And then you delve into that and figure out what people are interested in. One of my favorite stories is I was walking in the Holocaust Museum and saw that there was a guy's name, and it said let's just call it the Bob Ross, just for example, the Bob Ross Youth Exhibit. So what did that tell me? That whoever Bob Ross is, he likes youth. That's what I'm fundraising for. So let's go find Bob Ross. And then you figure out ways that you can get to Bob Ross. Once you create these opportunities for yourself, then it's easy. The original title of my job that they hired me for was National Director of Major Gifts. That title lasted about a month.
It's a scary title for anyone to email you from.
It is a horrible title. That title lasted a month. I went to some Jewish Federations of North America conference in Washington, and I was handing out this card, and they looked at it and, oh, Director of Major Gifts, and they basically handed it back to me like I was some pariah.
Yeah.
And right there, I said, I got to change it. And I had heard a friend of mine was going around with this other title, and I said, I love that title, and I tweaked it a little bit. And I became, which is what I am now, the National Director of Strategic Partnership.
Much more palatable.
Yeah, but it's a lot of words. But what it became is that really, I'm not interested in major gifts. I'm interested in creating partnerships.
It's the same number of words as your previous one. It's just things that's actually more meaningful. I'm not just looking for money. I'm looking for partnership. I'm looking for long-term relationships here.
I don't need for you to be a donor and then walk away.
Right.
It doesn't help me. I need you to be a partner.
For profit, nonprofit, doesn't matter. You've spent all the time prospecting that lead. Why would you burn that lead? Why would you only try to get utility out of a single time versus creating a good relationship and providing the actual value that you have guaranteed?
Right.
That makes that person feel that the money that they donated is going to a good cause, like you said, long-term ROI,
Right.
and that they want to continue to be involved.
But now that I had this world as my oyster, so to speak, of where you can go to, so now all these memories started coming back, and all these skills that I had started coming back, and all these opportunities growing up started coming back. So I would reach out to people from high school, right? So when I was a freshman in high school, there were seniors who came from Mexico. We didn't have a presence in Mexico, our organization. I reached out to this guy in Mexico who remembered me, and fast forward 4 years, I've been doing this almost 5 years now, back here 5 years, we now have our biggest chapter in the country. Our fastest growing, and we're fully funded now, is in Mexico. We're doing some of our best work over there. There are things that we're really pulling things together because we're just thinking of weird and some wild connections of how we can get there and trying to put two and two together and making not 4, but making 6.
Give me a little bit of insight behind the scenes here. Working in insurance, were you constantly looking back at your nonprofit skills and how they influence the success in insurance? Or are you more now looking back at your insurance time and the skills that you had as an entrepreneur building an insurance agency and a big book of business there, informing you in new ways for leveraging those skills into your, once again, fundraising experience in nonprofit?
So at the risk of sounding like a pun for this podcast, it really is true. Every skill that you have in your life, you automatically transfer to the next stage of your life. You just do. You might not even be cognizant of it,
right,
but you do. So what you've gained in high school, you take with you in college. What you gain in college, you take with you. And it has to do with your life when you're getting married and when you become a parent and when all these things, right? You transfer these skills and you take the good parts and hopefully you leave away the bad parts, right? Or you take some of you learn from the bad parts, right? At least that. Because I don't think there are any bad parts where you just don't learn anything from. You got to learn from them. So I think that there are definitely skills that I gained from dealing with teenagers. How do you deal with teenagers? Listen, these are the hardest people to sell to.
Yeah.
I have a teenager myself now, right? These are the hardest people to sell to. So if I could sell to teenagers to get them to come to a program, that was hard. So then I can ask someone for money. That's not that hard, right? If I can get out of my head, right? So you transfer that skill to the money skill. Then you take that money skill and okay, so now I'm selling that to money. Now I'm selling insurance. What is insurance? Insurance is not a product where I'm taking money from you and we're giving you like this ROI of this vision of a kid having a great. This is like an actual policy where if something bad happens, you get money to make you whole. And many times you have to have it legally for your business. So it makes sense, right? So you learn about that and how to make that happen. And now you have that. Now insurance is very as a business where you have to get into the weeds and it's a minutia business. You have to really know what's covered, what's not covered, what the exclusions are and things like that. It has to be listed on a certificate. And so once you have that, you become this mindset of like when you move on to your next career path, you have in your head these skills of not only being aware of how to sell to kind of anybody and to sell kind of anything, but also being specific in what you're selling and really drilling down on what it is that's important. And that's where I learned at this stage of the game how to really drill down in what a Noah Michigan really cares about and to find out what Noah Michigan really likes and find that common denominator, not just the common denominator of everybody likes cake. No, no one likes vanilla cake with vanilla frosting with white sprinkles and a little tiny bit of raspberry. And that's once you have all that stuff because you learned the minutia, you know how to sell, and you know how to sell to teens, and you can sell to adults, you can sell to anyone, and you know what details to look for, then you're golden.
Wow. Aside from the cake, you were spot on about everything. You couldn't be further from the truth on the cake for me, but providing a bespoke sales opportunity and experience. The barrier of entry selling to teenagers in 2024, higher or the same, no different than in 2005. You're competing for their attention and focus from things that are hard to compete against.
Impossible. Again, I'm basing this on my own team. She's busy every night of the week. Obviously school, right, but she's busy every night of the week. I don't even know the things she has. Obviously I know, but I mean, there's so many things that she's going to. We thought they were overprogrammed. The teenagers I was dealing with in 2005, 2003, whatever, we thought they were overprogrammed then. These guys have a million things going on. Forget about gymnastics,
right,
and hockey. Those things, those things exist. But you're talking about basketball and sports and more than sports. You're talking about play practice. And now you're talking about other organizations that are running these kind of programs and those kind of programs. And kids want to be involved. When I was a teen, and maybe it's the same when you were a teen, we were teens basically at the same time. I don't remember there being anything. For sure, I didn't go to anything. I don't remember there being anything like major outside of maybe during the weekends. There were leagues or things like that, but there wasn't anything like every nights of the week. And now there's stuff that you can go to. It's very hard. And so what I tell people, again, because they go all over the country now, and I work with not only the donors one-on-one, but also I work with our own people on the field. And they say, I can't fundraise. I don't want to fundraise. You come in. Everyone calls me Mo. You come in, Mo. You fundraise. And I say, you brought 30 teens on a program, right? Yeah. You convince their parents to give you their children, right? Yeah. You can fundraise.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's really, it's a lot harder. I can't even do what you do now. I really can't. I can't do what you do now. There's no way. So you can for sure do what I do. It's very simple. And once you realize that realization that I had years ago, it's how much harder it is now to do that. It becomes a little bit easier to do the money part. But yeah, they're definitely over-programmed. It's definitely harder. There were no iPhones when we were teens. There were no iPhones in 2021.
But the flip side to that, yes, there's more distraction, but there's also more accessibility to communicate and disseminate information. I see my kids are in all these WhatsApp groups for organizations, including and such as your own and with school and sports, that they are aware of all these programs going on. And yes, there was program going on weeknights when we were teenagers. It just wasn't as robust as it is today, perhaps. But even if it were, I might not know about it. Now, the kids have access to the information. They're sharing with their friends quickly. It's not just up to the parents to tell their kids about things that they heard going on. Would you like to go to this? Would you like to be involved in that?
Right.
The kids are finding it themselves. So yeah, it might be more of a distraction in as much as it's also an opportunity for them to be aware.
But I will tell you something else that kids now have never wanted more to feel connected to something and to be a part of something.
100%. 100%. There's a great book I read a number of years ago, might be about 5 years ago at this point. It's called The Power of Ritual. This is an individual who, tech entrepreneur, not Jewish, but found the benefit of observing the Sabbath. And as he says in the book, it doesn't have to be on the seventh day if you're not an observant Jew. It could be any day of the week. As long as you are disciplined about it, you're consistent. It's like your vacations as a professional. If you set the expectation that you will return emails during your vacation, people will continue to send them to you. But if you
That's
set
right.
the expectation of the time and place,
Mhm.
they will follow that. And so he describes this huge benefit and value that he gets out of observing a day, a 24-hour, 25-hour unplugged.
Yep.
This time where I can read a book, I can socialize with friends, and I could tell you something personally for me in my ritual. There are so many benefits. One that appears surface level, but is so much deeper is something like playing board games with friends. When else in 2024 are people carving out time for that?
Right.
And it is so important. It really is important. It sounds superficial because you're playing a game, but what I'm really doing is I'm spending quality time that doesn't feel like there needs to be an end time. We had guests over for lunch this past weekend on Saturday,
Yeah.
and we started lunch around 1 o'clock. They left around 5:30.
Wow.
We sat around the table for that long, and we had good conversation.
And the Sabbath is over
Sabbath is over
by then already.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we drove them home afterwards. And the
Right.
point of this is you might find opportunities to do this. That's why people, I think, often they'll go out for happy hour for drinks. It's because
Right.
you're creating an opportunity to engage with people. And when you do it in a way that's disciplined and routine and regimented, you're forcing yourself into unplugging, but also connecting in some ways. You unplug the technology, but you're plugging in the personality and you're
Yeah.
connecting with people and you're spending more time. So I agree with you that there's never been a more important time for kids looking for an opportunity to connect socially in person, away from staring down at their screens.
Yeah.
I picked my kids up from basketball last night and there's four of them in the car. They're all looking down at their phone.
Right.
We try to maintain a rule in our car is phones are not out.
Right.
And that's because we have an opportunity right now. You're stuck. You're stuck here. Let's talk. Let's engage. Let's
Yeah.
socialize.
Right. Risk at the Eisenberg house or Monopoly at the Eisenberg house Friday night, it gets heated.
Oh, yeah.
Mainly between my 8-year-old and my 11-year-old sons. It gets heated.
There's learned skills in those too.
Yeah.
It's the ability to strategically negotiate
Oh, yeah.
especially in a game like Risk or Monopoly. What is my plan? Do I have an end goal?
Right.
The end goal is to win, but how am I going to go about doing that? In many board games, there's a diverse set of strategies.
Well, we talked about I owned 2 sets of property and I had hotels on them and I wouldn't buy anything else and they were buying everything. What good is 2 hotels? I
Yeah.
said, you just wait. At the end, I won on these 2 properties because it was just, that's all I needed. And but also on the flip side, it's also, again, it's in the same side, it's donors, right? On the flip side, it's donors. Donors also need something to connect to. They also want something to hang on to. They also want something to know that they're really a part of. And so again, that's the thing is that you really have to stick to the partnership. And part of what I have found successful is I really use LinkedIn a lot. And I use LinkedIn not as a platform for raising money, but as a platform to just showcase how we partner with people and that partners make a huge difference. And this is how they make a huge difference. And so it really has been incredible to see people come over to me all the time from wherever and say, I see that you guys are doing amazing things. And I say, how do you even see that? LinkedIn, it seems to be working.
You impart these words of wisdom on me all the time. I always worry about self-promoting, and I think your response to me, if I can summarize it, is it's not self-promotion if it actually is providing value and inspiration for others, if you're doing it for the right reasons. Back to that earlier point, assume best intent. Assume best intentions that the individual is doing it because they organically, holistically believe in what they're doing. And if you're proud of it, promote it, and others might be inspired too.
I think so. And like I said, if someone will hear this podcast or someone will say, hey, you know what, I'm in sales and I'm selling widgets or I'm selling insurance or I'm selling houses or I'm selling cars and I could give someone my time and I bet I could help fundraise for an organization. I fundraise for cancer research. We fundraise for, you and I have done this together. We fundraise for different cancer organizations and
Yep.
we fundraise for lots of different things together. And we've not our organization professionally. And if we can do that and we can, or someone listening could do that and utilize those skills to be able to help help other people. That's what the game's all about. And the game's called life, and you could be a winner.
Wow. Wait, the old jingle. Nice. My parting recommendation for anyone listening that is currently a supporter of a nonprofit organization, wants to be, is at a level and wants to even potentially consider increasing to that amount. My recommendation is go out and see them do the work that they do, because you will be inspired. If the organization is doing a great job, which most of them out there are, nothing will give you a sense of satisfaction for where your money has gone and give you the reason and motivation to increase your involvement. Because when you see them doing the great work, as I have seen Mo and his team do, it makes me so proud, and it just makes me want to continue supporting. So that is my recommendation. Go out there, ask the organization that is meaningful to you. Say, can I show up somewhere where you're doing the work?
Ask the organization questions. Is anyone else doing this? Or I saw someone else doing this. How are you different? That isn't a question that every organization should know the difference, should know the answer to. And you have to really feel that your money is going to somewhere that it makes sense. And if you don't, then don't partner with them. I'd be the first to tell you, if you don't think we're spending it fairly, if you don't think that it's going somewhere that you trust or whatever, don't do it. But every organization should be able to stand behind it in a fair way and be able to tell you, this is why what we're doing is differentiates us from everybody else.
Well said. Mo, thank you so much for being here.
You got it. Keep on keeping on, baby.
I want to thank Noah Mishkin for recommending Mo Isenberg as today's guest. Why am I thanking myself? It's because, like I said at the top of this episode, Mo and I grew up together. I've known him for a long time. And because every conversation I have with him is inspirational to me, and I know the various journeys or chapters of his journey that he's been on, I knew that it would be very valuable to our listeners and a great episode. So I hope you've enjoyed listening. And I want to also thank you, our listeners, for joining us on this episode of Transferable Skills. Remember, if you found value in today's episode, please subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, share it with your friends and network, because your support helps us reach more people who could benefit from these stories. Transferable Skills is produced by Cackle Media and music by Cost Monkey. For more resources and inspiration on leveraging your skills for a successful career transition, visit our website at cacklemedia.com and follow us on social platforms at Cackle Media for updates. Join our community of listeners who are all about embracing change and growth. If you have a question, feedback, or want to share your own career pivot story, email us at skills@cacklemedia.com. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for listening, and remember, the skills you have gained can take you anywhere. Until next time, keep exploring those transferable skills.